Hi, I'm John, and this is my video about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. So in this video, I'm going to be exploring the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, or CAF. We're going to be starting by looking at what is CAF, and then stepping through each of the 7 phases of cloud adoption as defined in the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. So the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework is a framework that is designed to be used by businesses and organizations that are adopting cloud services. And it helps build and implement business and technology strategies for successful cloud adoption. So there's a mixture of technical and business guidance in the Cloud Adoption Framework. The early stages in particular are focused on understanding business outcomes and business motivations for cloud adoption. And then we go into the planning of aligning our technical efforts to those business outcomes and then the delivery. So CAF brings together the best practices defined by Microsoft employees, partners and customers. And CAF is contributed to by many people and organizations, and it takes the lessons learned from previous cloud adoptions to provide guidance on your cloud adoption. It helps organizations meet their unique business goal. So of course there is no shoe fits all when it comes to cloud adoption, and the Cloud Adoption Framework is adaptable for different business scenarios, different expected business outcomes. It's a combination of recommended practices, documentation, tools, and the common mistakes that can be made with cloud adoption. And finally, it's targeted at cloud architects, IT professionals, and business decision makers. So as I mentioned, some phases are very business focused, others are technology focused, and it combines all of those areas into one framework. So these are the 7 phases that I'm going to step through, and these are what make up the Cloud Adoption Framework. We've got strategy, which is the initial speaking to stakeholders, understanding motivations and business outcomes. We then go into a technical planning phase, looking at our digital estate, how we can move applications and workloads to Azure, what's the best way of doing that in line with the business outcomes, but also understanding what the skills gaps are, and creating a plan for cloud adoption. Then have ready, which is a primarily technical phase, and this is around delivering the initial Azure platform. It's not around workloads at this point, so it's not around hosting your application yet. It's about standing up the initial platform and the platform services, for example, monitoring core network, on-premises connectivity, and stuff like that. We then have adopt, which is about getting your workload onto Azure, whether that be through a migration, a re-architect, or refactoring your application to fit a more efficient cloud service. So that's all part of the adopt phase. And then finally, we've got the 3 phases at the bottom: security, management, and governance. And these are phases that are in the top 4 phases, and it's something we think about throughout the project, but then it's also ongoing after the initial platform's been set up and we've got our workloads in there. We're going to continue to work on security, management, and governance. So let's step into the first phase, which is strategy. And strategy is very business focused. This is all around why are we adopting the cloud. So we need to define and document the motivations. Why are we going to the cloud? How has this thought come about? What are the business outcomes that we're expecting from cloud adoption? What are the financial considerations? The cloud is fundamentally different in how we pay for IT. And technical considerations as well. It's also fundamentally different in how we manage our environment and our workloads. So we need to define a business justification and the expected outcomes for the cloud adoption. It's important that we understand from the business what they're expecting. If we were to go about a cloud adoption without the business outcomes in mind, we could be attempting to adopt the cloud without direction, which can leave us in a situation where we're likely to be unsuccessful in meeting business objectives. So the motivations, some examples here: agility, reducing costs, innovation with new technologies, and the expected outcomes that we define in phase 1 is what will later be used to measure the success of the cloud adoption. And we also, in phase 1, define a financial model that justifies adoption based on the expected outcomes. So there's a whole range of services that are available to us. Some are cost effective, some are expensive. So we need to ensure that the decisions we're making for the technical services that we're adopting is justified against the expected outcomes of the business. So now I'm going to step through these 4 areas. The first being define and document your business outcomes. So as I mentioned, it's important to understand the business outcomes, expected business outcomes early on. So we meet with key stakeholders and executives to document the motivations behind the cloud adoption. The question is, why are you moving to the cloud? And we evaluate and assess the potential impact of motivations. So if we take, for example, critical business events such as mergers or data center closures where we've got a deadline or could be financially penalized if we go over a certain date, those kind of events are going to impact our cloud adoption and how we go about it. Because we're going to have a deadline, or we're going to need to move with certain workloads, and it's going to affect all of the later phases. Then have documenting our business outcomes, and the most successful cloud adoption journeys start with the business outcome in mind. That gives us a goal or goals to work towards, and these provide that direction throughout the entire cloud adoption journey. We need to foster the right level of support from IT and other areas of the business for success. So we need to communicate the cloud adoption. We need to get the backing of the necessary people in the business to support the cloud adoption. Business outcomes that are concise, defined, observable and tangible. So I'm going to give some more examples in a later slide of some specific business outcomes that you might see, but ultimately they need to be observable and tangible. There need to be outcomes that we need to be able to measure at a later stage to measure success. Then have understanding financial considerations, and financially, cloud is a fundamental shift. When we've got an on-premises environment, we've typically got a capital expenditure model. We spend a lot of money, maybe at 3 or 5 year intervals, buying hardware. We have a project to set it up and configure it, and there's a lot of capital expense around that time. But then over 5 years, the outgoings are lower for maintenance. In the cloud, we pay for what we use, when we use it, and at the scale that we use it. And this is a very different cost model. We're effectively paying over we're paying all the time for when we're using services. And financial people in the business need to understand these changes, the financial position, accounting, KPIs and processes. And the CFO and the financial team need to understand how this is going to change. We then have understanding technical considerations. So another fundamental shift is the technical nature of the cloud in comparison to an on-premises environment. So technical considerations to help improve management and maintenance of cloud and workloads. So it's fundamentally different in the flexibility, efficiencies and capabilities that aren't possible with on-premises infrastructure. And we need to consider this and how we approach this, because it's going to be different from what people in the organisation are used to. So as an example of motivations, business motivations, we've got transitioning from that capital expenditure model to an operational expenditure model, and the ability as well around that to turn on or turn off features as we require. If we've got an application, for example, that needs to scale up at certain times of the month or the year, because there's a reason that there's a lot of demand for the application at that time, this can be very cost effective on the cloud compared to on-premises. Agility is another example, the ability to scale up and down, as I just mentioned. Operational resilience, disaster recovery and business continuity plans. In nature, naturally, the cloud provides a lot of capabilities with less work than what you might have in an on-premises environment. Another one being innovation, spurring new product development and improve existing processes, and geographical expansion, so the ability to rapidly deploy services and applications around the world close to the people that will be using it. Whereas on-premises, there'd be a lot of work usually involved in setting up additional data centers to be able to get that geographical expansion. So then onto business outcomes, and as I mentioned, measurable business outcomes. Improving application response times and reducing system downtime. So that's a measurable business outcome. Achieving a certain percentage of cost savings or return on investment. Reducing time to deploy new features or updates. Customer satisfaction scores, increasing active users. So all measurable outcomes that we can use later in different parts of our cloud adoption journey to measure the success against what the business was expecting from it. So next we've got phase 2. So we've got our initial strategy done. We understand the business outcomes that are expected and the business motivations, and then we're ready to move on to the next phase, which is planning. So we've got digital estate, initial organisational alignment, skills readiness plan, and cloud adoption plan. So I'm going to go more into these areas in the next few slides. Ultimately, business digital estate is understanding what's in the current environment. What are the workloads, the applications, VMs, servers? Initial organisation alignment is speaking to the people in the business, getting the backing of the people of the business. Skills readiness is understanding the skills gaps and what we need to do to get the right skills to be successful in our cloud adoption, and then cloud adoption plan as well. So we've got aligning your technical choices with your desired business outcomes. So taking the business outcomes from strategy and aligning our technical decisions with them. Designing a foundational architecture to support the desired business outcomes, and the cloud adoption plan, which is to develop a cloud adoption plan to manage change across skills, digital estate, and your organisation. So let's look a little bit more at the digital estate. So this is all around rationalization, and this is the process of evaluating assets on premises to see how we can run them in the cloud. And these fall into 5 categories. There are more, but these are 5 of the most common. We've got rehost, which is also known as lift and shift, and that's replicating a virtual machine or a physical server into Azure with its operating system intact, exactly how it's configured, file, folder, structure, registry, installed software. It copies the server exactly as is and moves it to the cloud. So that's rehost, and there's no major change to the architecture. Of course, there's going to be more services in Azure that we've got around it. The network's going to be different, but ultimately it's a lift and shift of what's already there. And this, although it's an approach that is appropriate for some workloads and in some scenarios, there's a lot of benefits that can be gotten from other methods of moving our workload to Azure, such as using more cloud native services where we have integrated cloud capability to replicate our application to other regions. And that leads us to refactor. And this is when we've got our application, but it needs to be refactored to fit a cloud native model and all of the benefits that can come with that. Re-architect is similar to refactor, but more involved. This is when the application is far from being compatible with cloud. It may not have been architected to fit a cloud native architecture. So that's when we would re-architect the application. We then got rebuild, and this is rebuilding the application from scratch. So in some scenarios, if we've got particularly big issues with an application and the business need justifies it, we can go to the effort and work to rebuild the application from the ground up. And then we've got replace, which is replacing the application with a SaaS service. So many applications are available as an application that you install in your data center or a SaaS service equivalent. Or you could choose to move to an entirely different product. If you're using Salesforce, you could move to Microsoft Dynamics, which is a cloud service. Okay, so as with the rationalization, it's a common misconception that you must do a full rationalization, i.e. going through all of your applications, deciding an approach for each one before you can start any cloud adoption. And that's not recommended because it will delay cloud adoption potentially quite a while because it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort and a lot of skills to properly rationalize all of your applications. So what we can do is prioritize applications, come up with a plan for each of those applications, the ones that we want to move first, and then we can start beginning our cloud adoption and moving those applications while we're still rationalizing the rest of the estate. So then the next area of plan is the initial organizational alignment, and this is understanding the people-related aspects of cloud adoption, aligning people across the business to make our cloud adoption plan a reality. And it's initial organizational alignment is what's required for the cloud adoption plan. Full alignment is not necessarily needed at this stage. The next area is the skills readiness plan, and typically IT staff that we've got, if we've got no adoption of cloud services or not a wide adoption of cloud services already, we might have a lot of staff that don't necessarily have the skills yet around cloud services. So we need to identify the gaps, roles, skills and processes that don't yet exist in the organization. Because if we don't address those gaps, it could hinder cloud adoption or make cloud adoption unsuccessful. We can help preempt issues such as resistance of cloud adoption. There could be some resistance from people that are concerned about the cloud adoption and the direction that it's going to take their role. So we can preempt issues like that. Some of the potential solutions are training programs for staff or talent acquisition and recruiting externally if required. Finally, we have the cloud adoption plan, and this is an iterative project plan for cloud adoption. It supports the transition from traditional IT approaches to modern agile approaches, and outlines motivations, business outcomes, and business justifications for the cloud adoption from the strategy phase. Desired returns are then balanced by the effort required to realise them. So we balance the effort, understand the effort that's required, and align it to the desired returns. So now we have phase 3, and this is a technically focused phase, and it's around the deployment of the Azure platform. As I mentioned earlier, it's not around the workloads at this stage, so we've got a plan, or we're working to rationalise our digital estate as part of phase 2. We could still be in phase 2 when we start phase 3. It's not sequential in that sense because, as I mentioned, we shouldn't wait for full rationalisation before we start cloud adoption, and this is the start of the cloud adoption. So phase 3 is focused on the implementation of what's known as an Azure landing zone, and this is ultimately the Azure platform, the key core centralised services, typically those services that would be managed by a central IT team, and implementing those. And it fits into 8 critical design areas. These are 8 areas of different services, such as network identity, Active Directory, security. I'm going to go more into the design areas on the next slide, but ultimately, in each of these areas, the Cloud Adoption Framework gives guidance, considerations, and recommended practices for how to configure these services for different scenarios. So then we've got DevOps and adoption and configuration as well. So Ready provides many pre-configured infrastructure as code tools, DevOps pipelines, which you can use in GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. So this is the code that defines what the infrastructure looks like and can help deploy it as part of this phase. So yeah, aligned to business and technical requirements and governance and compliance needs as well. So this is the suggested architecture of an Azure landing zone in the Ready phase. So the Ready phase is explicit with the technical recommendations on how to adopt the Azure platform and how to adopt these services as an initial project. So we can follow these recommendations, and we should follow them as closely as possible. In reality, we're going to have business needs that we need to address, and we're going to deviate in some areas from this architecture here. But generally, we follow the recommended practices in the Ready phase, and this is taken from lessons learned from other organisations. So we've got the 8 critical design areas on the right here, and these are Azure Billing and Active Directory tenant, identity and access management, resource organisation, network topology and connectivity, security management, governance, and platform automation and DevOps. So you can see on this diagram here, it provides, as part of the resource organisation, we've got in the centre the management group structure, which is the hierarchy of Azure subscriptions, and we have the Azure subscriptions under those management groups. So this gives us recommended practices on how to organise and use management groups, because there's different ways that you can do it, and there's ways that you would think that it would be logical to use management groups, but after your project to implement this, you might find that it causes additional administrative overhead. So this is why it defines management group structure. Network topology and connectivity, we can see we've got a connectivity subscription in the bottom left, and the Ready phase also makes recommendations on the network architecture, how we should connect to on-premises. In this example, we've got ExpressRoute, a VPN, or potentially a virtual WAN. We then have the management subscription, which is all around management and monitoring and having a central log analytics workspace. and identity subscription, which is around the domain controllers or Azure Active Directory domain services. So ultimately, this lays out a recommended architecture, and we can deviate from this as required to meet our business needs. The next phase is adopt, and this phase is about migrating, modernizing, innovating, and relocating workloads in Azure. So going back to the plan phase, phase 2, where we defined a plan for how we were going to rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild, or replace our applications. This is the phase where we take action to complete that work. It provides guidance on efficiently moving our applications or infrastructure to the cloud and building new cloud-native solutions or modernising existing solutions. We then have the secure phase, which is phase 5, and we're getting now into those 3 phases, which are ongoing phases after the project to implement the platform. It's an ongoing phase that we iterate upon. It provides a vision for a complete end state. However, security is an ongoing journey with no static destination. It guides the improvement of security over time, helps us to establish and maintain security posture of the cloud environment, and it also encompasses Zero Trust, Open Group, and the NIST cybersecurity framework. We then have manage, and this is around our operational processes from an Azure platform perspective across the Azure estate. It's addressing business outcomes with management strategy, ensuring optimal operations and continual improvement of the cloud environment, continually refine, optimize resources, costs, and operations. So you can see how this is an ongoing phase. We're going to be, after the initial platform implementation, getting some of our workloads on there, we're going to be continuing to evolve the environment, evolve workloads. So it's going to be a constant process of optimizing resources, making sure we're getting the best value for money out of our cloud services, not needlessly using services that we don't need, that don't provide much benefit in line with the business outcomes that we've defined. The ongoing operation of digital assets delivers tangible outcomes. So you can see at the bottom here we've got business alignment, and this is understanding the criticality of workloads, the impact and the commitment. What commitment are we making to users of the applications? And then we've got 5 technical areas: inventory and visibility, operational compliance, protect and recover, which is disaster recovery, platform operations, and workload operations. And finally, we've got phase 7, which is the govern phase. And this is cloud governance through an iterative process, another ongoing phase that we do address as part of the ready phase. So going back to that diagram, the architecture diagram during the ready phase, there's policy assignments to that management group structure that we looked at in the subscriptions. Ready suggests some policies that will maintain governance across the environment, but we actually need to understand from the business what specific policies we want, how do we want to govern the environment, what do we want to stop being created. As an example, deploying virtual machines that are very expensive because they can go up to many thousands of pounds or dollars per month. So do we want to restrict that with Azure policy? Other examples, blocking public IP addresses, which may affect the security of the entire environment. Do we want to block them? So this is an ongoing process, and as the environment evolves, it's going to be a constant process of evaluating for new policies. Provides actionable guidance that represents common experiences of customers and helps create personalised governance guides to meet business needs. That concludes my presentation on the Cloud Adoption Framework. Thank you for watching.